Hello everyone, welcome to the IAS Network Internal Security course for Mains 2020. Today this is the second lecture of the series and we will be covering today the topic social media and the associated internal security challenges arising due to social media. So let's begin with it. So basically, as we are aware, social media consists of multiple platforms which are basically providing the user with an option of interacting with each other. For example, you have Facebook, WhatsApp, even YouTube, and a lot of other platforms as well. So basically, it is a tool in order for the people to exchange their thoughts, views with each other. However, through these platforms, there are some internal security challenges that are arising. For example, there are cyber terrorism happening, frauds, crimes, as well as spreading of rumors, violence, which are leading to situations like mob lynching, etc., etc. So basically, first let's try and understand what is the issue behind, like what are the contributing factors behind social media leading to these kind of situations. So what are the various characteristics that a social media has which enables the platforms to be used in these kind of scenarios. For example, a social media has low user authentication. So basically, you just need an email ID and a password in order to access any kind of social media. So whereas in person to person you have the identity of the person being assured through physical presence, which is not the case in social media. Similarly, you have inherent anonymity in social media. You can create an account with a different username as compared to your original name and still can operate the social media. So basically, there is an inherent anonymity and there is a very fast reach of this platform. So the pace of propagation of information or any kind of uh, ill that is being caused to the society is very rapid. So basically, if you can transmit the information in say one day in the physical world, that could be transmitted within minutes on the social media. That's why social media is an important tool which is being used for propagating these kind of negative activities, etc. Then there is inherent social networks. A single person might be associated with a lot more number of people on the social media platforms in comparison to its physical environment, because this is constrained by the physical movement in the physical world, whereas in social media you can contact a person who is staying like thousands of kilometers away from you in a single click. So basically, these are the basic contributing characteristics of social media which increases its propensity to be used for these kind of nefarious activities, which is the reach of the platform, the pace at which you can reach people, the anonymity that you can maintain on these platforms, along with the inherent social networks that is having a lot more connections in comparison to your physical world, whereas there is low user authentication as well as low regulation. So these are the basic characteristics which enable social media to be used for negative consequences, which are creating challenges for our internal security situation. So social media, so as we have understood that it is basically any web or mobile based platform which could be used for communication interactively or one way or two way, whichever way is possible. So it might include all your platforms that you might be using throughout day in day out. And as if we see what all are the issues that are being propagated through social media, these might include your cyber terrorism, frauds, crimes, violent messages, hate crimes, etc., etc. So basically, but we must understand that social media in itself is not a security threat. It is just a tool in order to propagate internal security threat kind of issues. So basically, we have to somehow try and regulate this tool, either voluntarily or through government intervention or through industry intervention, in order to ascertain that the use of the tool is in proper way. So it should not be used for any negative consequences. So that is what we have to ensure. As such, social media in itself is not an internal security issue. Now let's try and look at some of the recent incidences when internal security issues were created using the platforms of social media. For example, now these issues could be with respect to any individual. So it could be with respect to me, you, or anyone else, or it could be against an organization. For example, banks are being uh, banks are being looted away from with their important financial data. Similarly, it's a fraud against us as well because our privacy is being violated. Similarly, there are attacks against government establishments and critical infrastructure using these social media platforms. So the internal security threat has multiple dimensions. It might be against organization, it might be against the center, it might be against a single individual as well. So let's try and see what are the various incidences when social media was used in order to create a issue internal security situation. For example, these social media could be used for a positive mobilization as well. It's not necessary that each and every time the social media is being used to create an internal security crisis kind of a situation. For example, social media was used after the uh, social media was used in the India Against Corruption movement in 2011. So it was a positive mobilization against the state in order to bring changes in the uh, governance setup. And due to this movement itself, we found that later on the Lokpal and Lokayuk Act was passed. So this could be used as a positive mobilization. However, if this mobilization is not in a peaceful manner, it could result into an internal security crisis kind of a situation where the law and order is being broken by antisocial elements, and they are leading into ruckus or a chaos kind of a situation where the rights of the other people are not being appreciated. Similarly, there were numerous events that were organized after the infamous Nirbhaya gang rape case in 2003. The people were mobilized in order to uh, raise demands for better security laws, and this even resulted in the passing of the amendments to the uh, criminal justice system, and uh, J.S. Verma committee was set up in order to recommend some changes into the uh, criminal procedure code, etc., etc. So basically, we can see that it's very much that the tool could be used in both the ways, positive ways as well as negative ways. It's just about the mechanism that is being used and what are the intentions behind using that tool in order to propagate their message through the platform. So these two were, I would say, still some positive connotation related to these two examples where we found that the legislation got amended in order to have a better society. This was a case of, I would say, that activism from the society in order to get some new legislations and a better regulation into the society. If we look at further examples of this, we can see that there are numerous incidences of communal riots, mob lynching in the recent past, which has been propagated using fake messages or even morphed videos in order to create a surcharged environment, a communal environment in the country. For example, the communal riots in Muzaffarnagar. That was one of the incidences where WhatsApp messages as well as propaganda videos were used in order to incite violence in the region by targeting a single community and their religious sentiments, etc., etc. There have been cases of mob lynching in Jharkhand pertaining to a child kidnapping rumor. So most of the time in these kind of scenarios, a lot of people start acting upon the information they receive from these social media platforms, where no one is able to ascertain as to these information is correct or not. So a very critical component is basically fake news or the authenticity of the information being propagated through these platforms. So these are few of the incidences where actually the internal security threats were created. So it could be in the positive sense as well, but the very critical component of that is basically the mobilization of the people is in a peaceful manner. If that is in peaceful manner for proper within the constitutional demands, then it is perfectly fine. Whereas this could very easily go out of hand and create an internal security and law and order breakdown kind of a situation as well. Now let's try and look into issues which are being created out of social media, and this might be impacting, as I said, different sections of the society, different stakeholders. It might be an individual, it might be a political party, it might be the government or the society or the businesses. So there are various issues which are being created by uh, social media. So basically it's using that platform in order to create some issues. We'll try and look into what are the various issues that are being created, and then we'll try to see what are the challenges in order to tackle them, as well as what are the suggestions in order to deal with these kind of issues. So let's start with an individual. So basically at individual, what are the various issues that might arise out of use of social media in the negative sense? So one could be your privacy. So a lot of your information is available on the social media platforms. For example, your email address, your profile photos, your connections on the various social media sites, as well as your personal messages. So these kind of data could be very easily used against you, as well as it could be traded at various at dark web, etc., and which could be used by various companies in order to micro target your interests as well as other things. So one important issue at the individual level is the privacy. Second, we must be aware that there are numerous incidences of harassment as well as cyber bullying and eve teasing, etc., happening on the social media platforms. So another issue in this respect, with respect to the individuals, is cyberbullying as well as harassment, etc. There are cases of defamation. A lot of incorrect information or fake content is being circulated over the social media due to, as people use the anonymity offered by social media, and thus is resulting into defamation of few people. So it's very easily to basically propagate a negative image of someone on social media, so which might be a very, so it goes against the article 21, which is the right to life and personal liberty. So basically your dignity is being hurt through this defamation. Similarly, there are numerous cases of financial frauds where people are duped into some transactions where through social media, either through Facebook, or people might befriend you and basically try and get your personal details. Using that, they want to conduct some kind of financial fraud. So basically these are 3-4 dimensions where an individual can be affected, and there are issues related to social media usage, which might be piracy, cyberbullying, harassment, secondly defamation, or financial frauds. So this is one dimension where an individual is being affected. Similarly, your society might be facing some issues due to social media, which might include the various examples we covered, which is riots being happening, communal riots or some other form. Similarly, mob lynching cases, example being Jharkhand, similar riots being Muzaffarnagar. Similarly, when these kind of incidences happen over a period of time, it leads to the reduction in the public trust, which is an essential component of the social contract which holds the whole society together. So basically, whenever these kind of situations happen at a regular interval, people start losing faith in the law and order, which leads to the breakdown of the whole system. Similarly, these platforms are being used by various antisocial agencies, terrorist organizations, in order to mobilize people around their ideology. So these social media platforms are being used as a recruiting agency by these by these non-state as well as state actors in order to further their interest. So there have been a propaganda video by ISIS of late, which was showing that the Indian jihadis are fighting in Syria and calling for other Indian recruits to join the cause. So basically, this is a propagation of their ideology. So these kind of societal issues might also be coming forth due to internal security, due to your social media. Similarly, the businesses are also at threat due to this social media being used by various actors in order to further their interests. For example, there might be targeting of employees of various important businesses in order to extract sensitive information and conducting financial frauds. For example, recently there was the data of Zomato being leaked on the various user data from Zomato's database was being sold at the dark web. This shows that the sensitive information about various businesses, your food habits, is being leaked to various other players through the dark web. So this is being accessed through social media by maybe honey trapping some of the employees or some other mechanism. So for the businesses, the threat might be financial frauds, sensitive data being leakage, or their competitive strategy. So it might be that few uh, business business enterprises are basically indulging in voluntary targeting of their competitors so as to gain access to their uh, patented information or some competitive strategy in order to get a competitive edge in the market. Similarly, critical infrastructure is being targeted using these social media platforms. For example, we had our Kudamkulam plant. Uh, there was a malware attack on the Kudamkulam plant computers using a malware known as DTrack. So basically, these are our critical infrastructure, nuclear power plants, our electricity transmission lines, etc., etc. These could also be targeted using these social media platforms. So these are the various dimensions where business could also be facing some issues due to these social media. So using these social media, various actors might be leading to these internal security threats. Similarly, political parties or government might be facing some issues, so which might be in terms of uh, political propaganda being propagated against the a particular candidate or against a particular party. There was even your micro targeting of the interests of the people. Similarly, there was a famous case of Cambridge Analytica in USA, where it is alleged that the Russians interfered in the US presidential elections using the firm Cambridge Analytica. So these kind of issues might also be prevailing. So if we look at the various stakeholders in our society, which might include the society in general, individuals, businesses, as well as political entities, there is a threat to each and every stakeholder which might emanate from the social media. So there is a need to create a solution which encompasses all these dimensions, as well as it takes components from each and every stakeholder. So there is a role for each of these stakeholders in order to basically create a foolproof mechanism in order to deal with this kind of a scenario. So there was an example of deepfakes. Deepfakes is basically a AI based technology which basically is used to morph the videos in order to create a content which was not originally presented. For example, we have Photoshop. So Photoshop is a basic version of deepfakes. So you can basically create a new a morphed image or a morphed video out of the original content, which might be used in order to propagate some negative images of a person or defamation or creating new kind of ruckus in the society. There were even instances in the Karnataka Assembly election where the fake news was used by the rival parties and candidates, which were flooding the media. So these are the important instances which you can quote in your exam, in your mains answers as well. You can quote these specific examples in order to highlight the various issues which are being raised due to social media. So these were the various issues. Now let's try and look into the suggestions. So as I said, that there needs to be a comprehensive solution for this issue. It's not possible that you tackle it through just a law and order situation kind of a scenario, or just put all the responsibility on the social media platforms in order to tackle these kind of situations. There is a need for each and every section of the society to come together in order to deal with this kind of a situation. So as there are different stakeholders in this problem, there needs to be solutions from all these stakeholders in order to get the problem solution to the real ground root. So let's try and look at the various solutions that can be possible to this issue. So let's try and look it through different actors involved. For example, what could the society do in itself? So society needs to have a responsible behavior. It's very important that you do not take any information coming to you on the face value. It's not necessary that anything and everything you are consuming from a platform is correct. You need to do a double check on the information, that whether the information that you are seeing on your WhatsApp or your Facebook is 100% correct. So you need to do 2 to 3 level of authentication. You try and do a simple Google search, and there are various platforms where basically you can check the authenticity of the information. So if we are doing our behavior, if we are doing our duty as a responsible citizen, most likely this situation could be cured to a good extent. So we need to have res- show some responsible behavior. Secondly, we need to propagate this information. So there needs to be a proper information emanation program where people are made aware about the issues being created due to social media, and there needs to be conveying of the information that this is the duty of the citizens to basically show some responsible behavior in this scenario. Secondly, there needs to be some steps from the government side. So this could be some legislations in order to deal with this kind of a situation, which might include your fake news, a specific law for fake news. So there needs to be stringent guidelines, stringent punishments in order to curb this menace of fake news being spread through various platforms. Secondly, there was an important clause in the draft personal data protection bill, which said that there needs to be an informed consent while using your data, as well as the data fiduciary need to inform the people on as to when some data is being leaked, etc., etc. So there needs to be a proper mechanism in order to for each and every person to share their information, as well as some legal binding duties on the various stakeholders involved in order to deal with these kind of situation. Similarly, there needs to be an information and education as communication campaigns. Similarly, there needs to be personal due diligence. So you need to do due diligence in order before taking a step on the information that is being propagated. So in these laws, for example, on the fake news law, you can give some special powers to the enforcement agencies where they can probably deal with this situation in a better way. Similarly, the data fiduciaries are basically all the platforms which are dealing with your data. So they need to have so they basically need to first of all have informed explicit consent. For example, most of us, whenever we are downloading any kind of app, we generally don't tend to read the permissions that are required by the app. So basically, there needs to be explicit informed consent being given on the data being used by various platforms as well as mobile apps, etc. Then there should be an upfront declaration of any kind of leak of data. So it should not be that the enforcement agencies are finding out through some different mechanisms that some data has been leaked. If some data has been leaked from the data fiduciary, there needs to be a upfront declaration that yes, there has been some data leaked, and they should be supporting the regulatory framework and the legal agencies in order to curb the menace and try and locate which parties are involved in leaking the data, etc., etc. Then there needs to be proper tracking and removal of any antisocial content. This could be very easily done by the data fiduciaries, because with every data being generated on the social media, there is something known as metadata, which basically stores the information about where the data is being generated, who is generating, etc. So that metadata could be very easily used to track the fake news or antisocial content that is being generated, and it must be the responsibility of the data fiduciaries to delete or remove these kind of antisocial content within some specified timeline. For example, it could be that within say 1 hour, 2 hour of any antisocial content being like propagated through social media, it should be removed by the data fiduciary with a proper reporting as well as informing the legal enforcement agencies. Similarly, there needs to be a role of the social media in general. For example, not just the data fiduciaries, there needs to be a proper self-regulation code for which entails what are the ethical guidelines for the various parties involved. For example, be it a person who is generating the content or be it the data fiduciaries, there needs to be an ethical guidelines, so that even when there is no specific law, no specific guideline in order to deal with the situation, there should be an ethical backing ethical guide through which one can decide that this is the right thing to do and this is not the right thing. So basically, these 4 levels, if we make some systematic interventions at the societal level, at the legal level, at the data fiduciary level, as well as social media as a domain of media. So it needs to self-regulate itself, that what kind of content it is going to allow, what kind of content is not going to allow, and what is the role of what is the ethical role of each and every stakeholder involved in the process. Similarly, there needs to be a very, one must be sure that there cannot be very strict guidelines or very strict restrictions on social media. The reason for it is that the right to speech and expression under article 19 even extends to your expression through internet, which was recently stated by the Supreme Court in a case which was challenging uh, the internet uh, the internet blockage in Jammu and Kashmir post Article 370 being abrogated, etc. So basically, there needs to be limited government regulation and more of societal as well as self-regulation by the social media in order to tackle this situation. Other Similarly, other suggestions on this front could be that there needs to be open source intelligence being generated by the law enforcement agencies, which could be using data from multiple locations. So it's one it's basically one thing to track a person through a single account, but if we are able to create some actionable intelligence using multiple platforms, it could be we could be going much ahead in terms of tracking and basically finding out what are the reasons and who are the people involved in generating these kind of antisocial content. Similarly, we can have a multi-layered regulatory updated security software. So most of the times these social media platforms as well as other mechanisms which are being used to conduct financial frauds, etc., these are basically targeting the vulnerabilities in your software and your systems. So basically, if we are regularly updating and we are creating a multi-layered security architecture, then it's very likely that we would be able to tackle these situations in a much better way. Similarly, there needs to be a proper integration of the private sector in tackling this issue. As we are already aware that private sector has much higher efficiency and much higher innovation capability in these kind of sectors. Thus, we need to incorporate the private sector into our policy making as well as training and manpower generation for dealing with these kind of a situation. So these are the basic suggestions. I would highly suggest that you club your suggestions as well as issues across various stakeholders, as I have told you in the lecture. This would give a more structured approach to your answer in the examination. So let's try and revise what we did in this lecture. We basically try to understand why social media is being used as a platform in order to propagate these kind of internal security issues, which might include cyber terrorism, frauds, crimes, violence spreading, etc., etc. Similarly, we tried to look at what are the recent incidences when this mechanism actually happened. Then we followed with various issues pertaining to this social media from the view of different stakeholders, be it society, individual, political entities, or businesses. Similarly, we try to look into the various suggestions in order to deal with this menace, that too from different stakeholders approach. So this in a comprehensive way gives you a picture of how social media is important as well as how social media is creating some issues into for the internal security of the country and how can we deal with it. So this would be all from this lecture. From the next lecture, we will try and look into cyber security as well as other money laundering, other kind of issues. So please keep studying, and if you like the video, please if you like the content, please like the video, subscribe our channel as well as share it with your friends. Thank you.